Chicago's population has fallen to 2.7 million, which is its lowest level in decades. And after helping people here for years buy and sell homes all across the Chicagoland area, this info I'm about to share with you is something very few people are paying attention to. And in this video, I'm going to show you the areas losing residents the fastest, why they're leaving, and what this means for you if you're considering buying a home here. Let's talk Robbins, Ford Heights, and Riverdale. 3 different towns, but they're all telling a very similar story. Robbins went from 5,300 residents in 2010 to just under 4,400 today. That's a 17% drop. Ford Heights went from 2,700 down to 2,300. And Riverdale went from 13,500 to just over 12,000 today. Now, what's interesting about these three is it's not just that people are leaving, it's that there's almost nothing new pulling them in. And a big part of that comes down to the business situation in these communities. Because here's the thing people don't always realize. It's not so much that businesses are leaving these towns, it's that businesses never really were there to begin with, or they left so long ago that nothing ever replaced them. Now, Ford Heights is one of the most striking examples of this in the entire state, and the backstory is something most people don't even know. The village was originally called East Chicago Heights, and in 1956, the Ford Motor Company opened a stamping plant right next door, and it was a big deal. Good paying jobs, real opportunity nearby. So in 1987, the village actually renamed itself Ford Heights, hoping to annex the plant and finally get a piece of that economic activity. You see, that move failed. Chicago Heights actually got the annexation. Ford Heights just got the name and nothing else. See, that Ford stamping plant is still operating today over in Chicago Heights. But the village that literally named itself after it has a poverty rate of 40%. A median household income around $34,000, and almost no commercial base. It's one of the starkest examples in the entire Chicago metro of a community that never got the economic foundation it really needed to grow. Riverdale is another one that really hits you when you start to look at it. Riverdale didn't have a full single-service grocery store for years. Residents had to drive to Walmart and Pullman or take multiple bus transfers just to buy groceries. The city approved nearly $5 million in grants to bring in a Save-A-Lot, and that store still hasn't opened. Now, a different grocer finally opened in late 2024, years after that food desert had started. Now, when a community can't attract a grocery store through normal market forces and has to wait years for even a $5 million government grant, that tells you how hard it is for a community to grow. And Robbins is similar. Limited commercial tax base, aging infrastructure, and very little coming to offset the people going out. Now, that is a cycle that's really hard to break. Fewer residents means less tax revenue means fewer services and less infrastructure investment. And that makes it even harder to attract businesses and development that would bring more people in. But there are 50 new construction homes I've just been told about that are coming. Now, South Holland and Lansing are a different conversation. These aren't communities in crisis. The infrastructure is intact. Home ownership rates are very high. People genuinely want to live here, but they're still losing people, slowly, steadily, year after year. In South Holland and Lansing, the tax math is brutal. South Holland has an effective property tax rate of 4.25%, Lansing right behind it at 4.19. Both are more than 4 times the national average, and both sit about 15 minutes from the Indiana border, where that same tax bill will be cut in half or more. Nobody's leaving in a panic. They're just starting to run the numbers, and when it's time to move, and the numbers keep pointing them in one direction, they kind of head that way. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, because every time someone says the word Chicago, all they think about is crime. So let's get into it. Any of this has you thinking about the Chicago market, where to buy, what areas to watch, what to avoid. That's exactly what I'm here for. So reach out anytime here, or scan my QR code on the screen to sign up for my weekly newsletter. I break down the market every week, cover local spots worth knowing about, and I keep you up to date on everything happening across the Chicago area. I just met with someone who's relocating here from California, and she told me that when she had mentioned that she was moving to the Chicago area, people she knew for a long time looked at her like she had absolutely lost her mind. Like, why would you go there? That place is awful. And I hear this constantly. People from outside the Midwest have this image of Chicago that is completely disconnected from reality. They think it's like Grand Theft Auto and people are just throwing guns in trunks, like they're trying to complete some mission. Like the purge alarm goes off like every night here. Like you can't walk outside without something happening to you. that's just not what happens here. But I get where it comes from. Chicago's crime gets national media coverage in a way that very few other cities do. When something happens here, it leads news cycles. And when that's all you ever see, that becomes the entire picture of a city of 2.7 million people, to some people at least. Does crime happen all over Chicago? Absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise. That would be really dishonest. But here's the thing. Crime's everywhere. It's in California, it's in Texas, it's in Florida. Every major metro in the country has high crime. It happens. That's just the reality. The difference is Chicago gets the national spotlight in a way that shapes the entire city and the surrounding suburbs. And it's how people perceive it that really have never been here. And that perception has some real consequences for how people make decisions about where to move. I've had buyers who were genuinely excited about a home, great price, great location for them, and they went home and they Googled an area and they came back with a completely different concept of what it was. Not because they had experienced it themselves, because that's what they had just read, or what their cousin, Uncle Esther in Arizona had told them, somebody who lived here in like 1983. You see, that outside perception, whether it's fully accurate or not, shapes population movements. It shapes where people choose to buy. It shapes which communities have harder times to attract new residents. Now, if you actually want to look at real crime data by neighborhood or suburbs, not just headlines, there's actual numbers. There are sites that break this down for you. Neighborhood Scout, the FBI's Crime Data Explorer, and local maps like Chicago's Clear does all that. So you can actually look at specific areas you're researching and make your own call based on real information instead of someone's narrative that's never lived here. Because the story is always a little more complicated than headlines are seeming to make it to be. Now, I covered this in a few videos, but it's worth a quick recap because it's impossible to talk about these communities without talking about this. Illinois is consistently top 2 or 3 state in the country for property taxes. That's not an opinion, that's a tax foundation. Adam data and every other property tax ranking comes out year after year that proves this. But in the south suburbs, the specific issue is that ratio. You can buy a home for $175,000 and the tax bill be $7,000 or $8,000 a year in property taxes. It's a 4 to 5% effective rate. And if you're skeptical on this number, just open up your preferred house searching app and look it up. Your mortgage might be $1,100 a month. Your taxes could be another $650 a month on top of that. And 20 minutes away, right in Indiana, that same money buys you a newer home with a fraction of the tax bill. That math is super hard to argue with nowadays. The state line is not abstract for these communities. It's like 15 minutes away. You got Munster, Dyer, Schererville, St. John. These Indiana communities offer newer housing, lower taxes, and still a good commute to Chicago. Now, I've said it before, and I say it again. I sold homes in Linwood, and very often I would cross into Schererville for lunch without even thinking about it. The line is invisible in your daily life. The only thing that changes is that tax bill. And for buyers running the numbers, $300 to $400 less per month in taxes over 30 years is a life-changing amount of money. So sometimes they'll add a little commute to save the money. Okay, so we covered some of the South. Now let's move to some other suburbs that are losing people. And these actually might catch you off guard. Because we're not talking about economically distressed areas. We're talking about solid, working suburban towns that people have lived for generations. And yet, they're still declining. Let's start with Addison. Right in DuPage County, just west of O'Hare Airport, Addison peaked at 36,900 residents in 2010 and has been falling ever since, sitting around 35,000 today. That's nearly a 5% drop, and it has been consistently losing ground over a decade. And here's the thing about Addison that I can think explains a lot of it. It's surrounded by communities that are just stronger brands for buyers these days. You've got Elmhurst just right next door, which is a median household income of about $145,000, a thriving downtown, home values that reflect the demand that's going on right there. Lombard is just south as well, solid schools, closer to Oak Brook and the Yorktown Mall. Then you have Bloomingdale that sits just to its west. When a buyer is shopping that DuPage corridor and they're comparing different homes, Addison almost never shows up in the conversation. The homes are a little bit older. The community doesn't have the same pull that Elmhurst or Lombard carries. There's essentially no new construction changing that equation. So over time, people who are leaving, they aren't really being replaced. And that number just keeps drifting downward. It's not that Addison is a bad place to live. I literally lived here for 20 years, but it's now competing against better marketed, better resourced neighbors. And in real estate, perception and comparison drive decisions more than anything else. Now, if you head just north, you'll experience another town that gets outshined, and that's Elk Grove Village. See, Elk Grove Village is genuinely one of the most fascinating cases in the entire Chicago metro, and most people drive right past it on 290 without ever having any idea what's really happening here. The industrial park is staggering, 60 million square feet, over 3,500 businesses, one of the largest industrial parks in the entire US. By every measure, this place is an economic powerhouse. But here's the thing that stops me every time I think about it. During the day, the population of Elk Grove nearly doubles. Almost 31,000 additional people flood in every morning for work. And then they drive home, almost somewhere else. The town essentially empties out at 5 p.m. You see, because nobody wants to live here. And it's not because anything's wrong with it. It's because the housing never really kept up with all the jobs. The median home in Elk Grove Village was built in 1974. It's over 50 years old. Only 2% of the houses have been built since 2010. So when a younger worker takes jobs here at one of these 3,500 companies, they'll look at their options. A 50-year-old home in Elk Grove, or a few exits down the highway and you can be in Schaumburg or Palatine. When housing is a little bit newer, the amenities are a lot stronger, and the commute is still completely workable. And they choose that commute every time. The village has been losing population continuously since the early 2000s. Over 20 years, a slow, steady decline in a town sitting on top of the most powerful employment bases in the entire Midwest. You see, the jobs stayed, but the housing just never seemed to catch up. Now, Rolling Meadows is just the quietest story of the three, and sometimes the most telling. Median household income is close to $100,000, low poverty rate, good highway access as it sits near I-90. Arlington Heights is right next door. Schaumburg is minutes away. By every quality of life measure, this is a perfectly good place to live. People aren't unhappy. Nobody seems to be rushing out. But Rolling Meadows peaked in a population back in 2000 and has been losing people ever since. Over 25 years of continuous decline. And the reason is almost completely structural. There's simply nothing left to build here. The city is only 5.4 square miles. That's it. Rolling Meadows was essentially built out in the 1980s. Less than 4% of the homes have been newly constructed since 2000, meaning in a quarter century, almost nothing new has been added. So what happens? You see families raise their kids and they move on. Empty nesters, they downsize. A household of 4 becomes a household of 2. And because there's really no new subdivisions, no new developments really going on, nothing's coming at scale to replace them, the number just slowly drifts downward. 86% of similar sized cities across the country are growing faster than Rolling Meadows right now. Not because anything else went wrong here, it's because there's no mechanism left to grow. The town is full and it's slowly getting emptier. Now I want to make something clear about 3 of these towns. Addison, Elk Grove, Rolling Meadows. These are not towns in crisis. They're real communities, they employ residents, and they have a functioning infrastructure by all means. The decline here is quiet and structural. Not dramatic, but the trend line is kind of what matters. Because a town that is losing population for over 20 years without a clear reason to reverse it raises the real question about what will that community look like in another decade or 2. And that's the kind of thing I want people to understand before they make a buying decision in these communities. So across all 3 of these communities we just talked about, the built out land situation is part of the story. There's no new construction pipeline bringing in new residents, but there's also something else happening underneath. And I think that's the bigger story here. And it's happening everywhere in America, not just the Chicago suburbs. The households themselves are getting smaller, and the data of this is pretty striking. The average household size in the US in 1960 was 3.3. Today, it's just 2.53. That's nearly a full person less per household, gone over 6 decades. And the scale of that over thousands of homes in a suburb, that adds to thousands of missing residents without a single person ever moving. Right now, nearly 29% of all households in America are single person households. One person living alone. Back in 2009, it was 27%. That sounds small, but the shift is enormous when you can actually run the math across an entire community here. And the family formation picture is kind of getting more complicated. The US fertility rate is a record low 1.6 in 2024, according to the CDC. To put that in context, you need a fertility rate of about 2.1 just to maintain a stable population. We are well below that. Births in this country have fallen 23% since 2007. Now, why is this happening? There's no single answer, but the cost is probably at the top of the list. The average annual cost of full-time childcare nationally is $13,000 a year. In Illinois, it's around $15,800, nearly 20% higher than the national average. Illinois families are typically spending 14 to 17% of their household income on childcare. For infant care especially, it can run over 18% of a median Illinois family's annual income for one kid. The federal government's own benchmark says childcare affordability is 7% of income. Illinois families with young kids are paying more than double that just for one kid. And here's a stat that really stopped me. A survey earlier this year found that 71% of Americans said raising children is unaffordable. 71%. And that was the number one reason people gave for having fewer kids than they wanted. Not that they didn't want kids, they do want them. But the cost just makes it feel impossible. Now look, that number isn't abstract to me. When we had our first kid, daycare was $600 a month. I love my little girl. It wasn't easy, but we made it work, right? And we never really thought twice about it. But when my wife wanted a second kid, the first thing I could remember, and it went through my head, wasn't, I don't want this other kid. I love my little dude. It was, can we really afford this? Because now we're looking at $1,500 a month. Not because the place is fancier, just because that's what it costs now. And that moment right there is actually what data is measuring. It's not that people don't want families, it's that the financial math hits you before anything else does. And it also costs roughly $300,000 to raise a child from birth to 18 in this country today, not including college, just getting them to adulthood. So what happens? People delay having kids. They have 1 instead of 2, they have 2 instead of 3. The gap between the number of kids people say they want and the number that they actually have has never been wider than today. And when you layer that on top of suburbs that are already fully built out and not putting new residents in through new construction, you see the population just quietly shrinks down year after year, even in communities where people are still genuinely want to live. You're replacing a household of 5, maybe with a couple, and that number goes down even though nobody did anything wrong and nobody's leaving in a dramatic way. It's just the slow math of a society that is really expensive to have a family in. So where's everybody going? Well, west and southwest. And if you want to understand why these communities are exploding while ones we just talked about are shrinking, it really comes down to just one thing, and that's all the farmland. Think about what's been happening for the last 20 years. Hundreds of acres of Illinois flatland is farmland. Cornfields, soybean fields, land that's been in the same family for generations is now changing hands. Farmers are selling, developers are buying everything, builders are coming in and putting up subdivisions as fast as they can. You see towns like Plainfield, Yorkville, Shorewood, New Lenox, Hampshire, they're all growing. Some of them dramatically. You see Yorkville has grown 42% since 2010. Plainfield keeps adding subdivisions on what was cornfields just 5 years ago. Kendall County has been one of the fastest growing counties in Illinois for years running. And they're all still building because they all still have the land. Before we hop into our final point about things to look for when making a move, if any of this has you thinking about the Chicago market, where to buy, what areas to watch, what to avoid, that's exactly what I'm here for. So reach out anytime here or scan my QR code on the screen to sign up for my weekly newsletter. I break down the market every week, cover local spots worth knowing about, and I keep you up to date on everything happening across the Chicago area. So let's say you're actually thinking about making a move somewhere in the Chicago suburbs. What would you actually be looking at? Or what should you be looking at? First things, look at the businesses in that town. Not just whether there are restaurants and grocery stores, really look at it. Is there investment coming in? Are there new commercial developments going up? Or there's empty storefronts that have been sitting vacant for years? Because businesses, they follow where people go, but people also follow where businesses go. Now, when a community is attracting real investments, retailers, employers, new development, that tells you something about where that town is about to head. Now, when it's not, that also tells you something too. Second, what are the actual amenities? And I just don't mean a park district. I mean, what does life look like on a Tuesday night or a Saturday morning? Is there a downtown you can actually get to? Restaurants, coffee shops, things to do with your family? Or is it purely just residential homes with nothing around? You see, just buying a house? No, you're buying into a community. And the day-to-day quality of life in that town matters more than people give it credit. So make sure you know that before you're just rushing through your home search. Third, where are the jobs? This is one of the things that buyers underestimate all the time. A lot of people think about commute time to the city, but they don't think about what's actually around them for jobs. Because more and more people are working hybrid or even fully remote now. And when you're not commuting every day, proximity to major employment hubs matters different than it used to. But you still want to be near jobs for yourself, for a spouse, or just for resale down the road if you sell. Now, communities that sit near major employment corridors hold better value than ones that purely have just bedrooms and houses and nothing else around them. And then the biggest one, what lifestyle do you actually want? Because that is where most people I see make mistakes. They buy based on square footage and price per square foot. They don't ask the deeper questions. Do you want a walkable downtown community with a downtown feel? Do you want land, space, a little bit of quietness? Do you really want a new construction neighborhood where everybody's roughly the same age in the houses? Or do you want an established community with like mature trees that holds more character here? It makes a difference. You see, the data in this video can tell you a lot, right? Population trends, tax rates, what's growing, what's shrinking, but the data doesn't tell you how the town really lives. So do yourself a favor. Drive around on a weekend, walk a suburbs downtown, grab a lunch, go to a farmer's market, get a feel for the place before you make one of the biggest financial decisions probably of your life. And if you think about moving here and buying a new construction home, watch this video first, and I'll see you there.